Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are today in the world. This is George Kadifa of Sumero Equity Partners, and this is the second of a series of technology speaking events that we're holding at our firm. With us today is Kalyan Kumar. Kalyan Kumar, also that goes by KK, Chief Technology Officer of HCL Corporation. KK and I go a long way, several years. We've seen, this whole computing architecture switch and change and migrate at least twice in our lifetimes, if not more. And really what we asked KK to do today is to describe to us his thoughts and the directions and the strategies he's taking the HCL Corporation from a technology future perspective for IT infrastructure. And we're very pleased again to have KK with us. He's actually in London right now, so it's evening his time. The way we're going to do this event is we'll have KK speak, let's say 35, 40 minutes. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And then we'll leave between 15 to 20 minutes at the end for KK to have the opportunity to respond to your questions. With that, KK, it's yours, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, George. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you and the SAP team. So let me dive into. George did speak to me, and me and George regularly talk because we, from an operational perspective, we are on the Actian board. So we do keep chatting, and he brought up this point, said, hey, can you just talk about what's happening? And I said, yeah, fine. I can basically give you some perspective, and I hope I'll also learn a few things from each one of you in this. It's a continuous learning process. So whatever I'm talking to you is a point in time, point of view, correct? And it keeps evolving and changing in this world. Pretty interesting way. And I've been with HCL for 20 years, so I've seen some of these changes happening and how our business impacts. Just to introduce HCL, I think we are a $10 billion technology and services firm. Primarily, we've got three segments of businesses: IT and business services, which is pretty much infrastructure, applications, digital, IoT, cyber, all the IT operations side of our business. The second is engineering and R&D. We have a sizable, one of the top three large engineering services company, which we do across software, mechanical, aero, auto, consumer electronics, industrial, medical devices. It's not software engineering, but it's engineering in many cases. We do a lot of things which are physical sciences and a lot of those work around that. And third is our software products business, which continues to grow. So I'll give you a sense of what's happening on the IT infrastructure space, because this is an area where there's a lot of things happening. So I just wanted to touch upon one thing. I think we can't start any conversation these days without talking about what's happening because of COVID, and it continues to be in the face, correct? So COVID still exists, and I think it's evolving and changing its whole flavor around the whole scheme of things. But I think three big aspects that you are seeing. I think this is a time where a pandemic really, and I was January last week, I was in Davos, and I was sitting and hearing Yuval Noah Harari, and he was talking about this 21 things that's going to happen in the 21st century, and he mentioned pandemic, and lo and behold, Feb end, the whole world is shut down, correct? But the impact has been in three spheres: social, business, and technology. And the reason is you cannot ignore the dependency between all of them, because the effect of industries and businesses, the impact on the society, both on life and livelihood. I think it's very important to bring both of those aspects, is causing a lot of domino effect, and it's continuing to happen. And this whole issue of lockdown, unlockdown, lockdown, unlockdown, that continues to keep going on, correct? It's this lockdown seems to be not a one-time phenomenon. This is causing a lot of disruption. And I would say any business which is about congregating of people or anything which is around people, flow, and movement, pretty much is getting impacted. But there's a silver lining in technology. And one thing which I have realized, with customers have realized in the industry, is that a solid fundamental infrastructure is going to be a very, very important capability, which is going to be needed for large enterprises. If you do not have a solid technology infrastructure and a foundational capability, people have to realize that that's a very, very missing piece. So one of the things, the way we started to look at this, is there are the three things happening. Before I double click into infrastructure, I just want to give you a larger perspective. We started to see that there are some three sets of things which we really are seeing in our customer conversation, correct? It's about how do you use technology to enable the aspects around workload, cloudification, digital workplace, or fluidizing the workplace, adapting security, modernizing applications, but also looking at a lot of core aspects of reimagining the business around supply chain, e-commerce, IoTization, a lot of the other aspects. And then obviously the most important thing is how do you bring the human aspect of this whole thing, society, the social sustainability, work-life integration, health, and the human aspect of empathy, and leveraging a lot of the things that's available in the ecosystem, cloud, AI, and also reshaping talent. So hence the way we look at this is that if you really start to see what's happening in the infrastructure space. So I use this term that infrastructure modernization is the digital foundation for the new enterprise. So you need to have, because most of the effort in the industry has gone into what I call as looking digital rather than being digital. So you end up looking digital, you end up doing a lot of investments in CX, UX, front end, a lot of those capabilities. But then your core engine room, those pieces are not enabled truly to allow end-to-end digital. So companies should be able to look at that holistically. Simple example, when work from home became the new norm, large companies' infrastructure were all designed to handle VPN for 10, 20% of telecommuter. Now pretty much you have 90% of users. So people never designed network infrastructure, never thought about security in that context, never thought about delinking users, personas from devices, the things which were all needed to be able to enable this whole aspect. So I think that fundamentally what we're seeing in the market is basically the earlier approach was transform incrementally and drive operational improvement. The new approach you're seeing is modernize the stack with automation natively embedded and create a digital foundation which can create better user experience. So we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way people are looking at. And the ecosystem which is playing this whole game is across cloud service providers, the tech OEMs, and the telcos. Pretty much these three are and everyone has a role to play in the whole modernization of infrastructure or the new infrastructure. So the hyperscalers are really creating the new data center in a sense. But on the other end, you're suddenly seeing the explosion of the edge. The tech OEMs or technology stack are repurposing or making sure that the stacks are containerized, modernized, they're becoming the platforms. So take, for example, what's happening with VMware, what's happening with Red Hat, what's happening with SAP. They're all looking at how do I leverage this whole move towards cloud and also be in the hybrid journey. And the third aspect is the telco is going through a very interesting journey. Both telco as an enabler for infrastructure modernization. So this whole advent of software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking, network function virtualization, SD-WAN, things around that. But the second aspect is telco themselves going through a modernization journey. And now with the current scheme of things, with this whole clean networks and a lot of other things, many of the investments in 3G and 4G suddenly, because of some socio-political decisions, you need to modernize the telecom infrastructure. And obviously, a lot of the telco cloud is becoming a 5G, is becoming an IT infrastructure in a way, because they invest in the same technology stack which you're building, used to build the cloud. So we're seeing some level of transformation happening. Big shift towards experience. It's no more about end user computing. It's about productivity, experience, engagement. Contact center is getting modernized to support customer experience. A lot of shift around collaboration. You could see the advent of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Google Meet and Cisco WebEx. It's become a big theme, and then a lot of plug-in capabilities around collaboration. Lot of shift towards automation. We're seeing a big shift around moving towards not automating tasks, but embedding automation as a way of doing things, correct? Like infrastructure as code. And even if you really start to see the DevOps movement, I really look at the DevOps movement in three aspects, correct? One is really bringing the culture of the agile DevOps, bringing this new scaled agile, safe, or different methodologies and pattern to build better, tighter integration or bring a product-centric thinking. But then you really saw three streams, correct? The one is the CI/CD stream. It's about how do I do DevOps CI/CD enablement. The second is this whole move towards infrastructure as code, correct? So the whole, how do I use DevOps to enable infrastructure as code and embedding a lot of those capabilities around that. And the third is the whole SRE movement around DevOps, is how do I bridge DevOps and SRE to really bring full stack operators, correct? Just like you have full stack developers. So we're seeing a big shift in the thinking. The only difference I use is, I use a quote which I heard a long time back. So God made world in 7 days because he had no install base. And the fact is that in this world, you cannot solve this problem in isolation because there's a lot of existing infrastructure stack which exists, and then you have to have the new stuff. So you have to find a way to take the old and modernize to the new and continue to build new. So you have to do both. You can't do one or another. So hence, to solve this problem holistically for a customer, you have to take their mode 1 of their environment and then modernize it to mode 2. You can't say, I'll only do the new stuff and you can junk the old stuff. It doesn't work. It's just a lot of things which are interwoven and aggregate. Interestingly, some very interesting data points. This market is still big in terms of, let me touch the infrastructure modernization market. The infrastructure spend, the whole target addressable market is close to about 319 billion. So this is just services market in infrastructure modernization. The hyperscaler, if you go back and see the hyperscaler market, that's another huge big market which is sizable, correct? If you add all of them together, it's close to about 270, 280 million. So the entire market is moving towards that. So that's the hyperscaler market. The third, this thing is, which you're also seeing, is this whole spend by the telco, correct? And the telco spend is really going to be another big area, which we're seeing both by the comm service provider, the managed service provider, and the cloud and digital provider. So that's the whole evolution of the infrastructure market. So the way we really look at this whole thing is what I use this term called digital foundation. So the digital foundation is the foundational infrastructure, the way you build and modernize infrastructure in the new world. And the way you really start to do that is you have to reimagine what you are building, correct? So the way I really look at this is that there is this one part which you call as hybrid cloud, which is about really old data center, classic systems, but bolted on with software-defined infrastructure, SDDC, cloud-native infrastructure, CAS, PaaS, enterprise platforms, and then embedding infrastructure as code and those aspects. The second side is the way it's happening with infrastructure modernization. This whole emergence of the digital workplace, correct? How do I move away from this whole end user computing mindset to more about user experience services, smart workspaces, smart devices, communication, collaboration, change management? There's a lot of focus around enterprise SDN, which is a software defined network, SD-WAN, network function virtualization, which is happening in the enterprise. And the similar thing is happening in the carrier world too. So if you really take the hybrid cloud, you can see they're creating telco cloud, correct? They're creating some of those other aspects around the edge, correct? They're trying to build a lot of those capability, underpinned by cybersecurity. And then how do you reimagine the way you run operations and unified service management? That's the way we really reimagine and relook at how infrastructure is getting modernized. And that's how the whole world is moving. Sorry, I think there was a pause on the video. Apologies. I think this is a network blip. Yeah. So let's double click on each one of those areas which we are seeing. Correct. So one is, let's see, just take a look at what's happening on hybrid cloud. So there is very interesting. There is this two-speed engine model which is existing. Correct. So there is a big focus around, from a digital transformation perspective, there's a big push around optimize the enterprise core, take cost out, focus on incremental, and so look at core processes. So a lot of the focus is around, hey, run to retire, modernize the core. How do I put in enterprise workloads on top, and really start to look at fair amount of scale ops and DevSecOps implementation on this side. Then there is the other side where, because of the new way of doing digital, there's a lot of work around CX, UX, innovation, new business model, faster route to market, P2C aspect, which needs a different kind of an infrastructure strategy, right? So how do I do digital at scale? How do I do edge to cloud? How do I do infrastructure as code, containers, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes, move on hyperscaler? But I still need to solve mainframe. It's not every, and I don't know, I've had this conversation with George for like, every time we think mainframe will exit, correct? It's not happening, correct? In terms of this mainframe continues to evolve, live, and the TCO continues to drop on the mainframe. So much of those investments exist. You still have classic infrastructure which you need to maintain. So the question is that it's not so easy to shut this down. The intent is to, over a period of time, modernize the stack, shut it down, and move towards the right. But it's a journey. So hence, in a large enterprise, hybrid cloud is becoming a reality. So that's one clear trend which we are seeing. So there is a shift happening from data center centric thinking to a more evolution of hybrid cloud, where customers are looking at hybrid, like an adaptive data center model, which is, hey, can I find an interesting colo or a colo which has got high-speed interconnect to the cloud provider, correct? And then I could still keep my closed services around that, but I don't need to commit and own a large number of data center space. Then start to look at how do I redefine my networking and security stack to support that adaptive hybrid cloud, and then move towards leveraging public cloud and hyperscaler, but still continue to adopt a lot of edge and other capabilities. So we're really seeing a evolution happening on the data center side. Interestingly, in the last 6 months, especially, we've seen a significant focus and adoption of public cloud, more from a reality of, hey, I think I need to scale up quickly so that I can enable productivity and workplace. So hence, customers are also starting to look at, hey, this is a good reason for me to quickly exit data center assets. So we're seeing some interesting amount of movement around large data center exit deals, rapid sourcing, shortened deal cycles, and then there is a lot of new infrastructure modernization deals which you're seeing over the last 6 months, and especially in the last 3 months. There's also one fundamental shift happening, which is basically the skill set shift of people or these technical resources, which many of the cases in infrastructure, maybe in-house with the customer, in-sourced, or they could be outsourced. Is this whole move towards from an I profile skill to a T profile skill, which is about an E profile, which is really about how do I create someone who has an understanding of not just of a single stack. That's how historically infrastructure outsourcing and infrastructure technology stack was. I was super specialized on one, to an ability to understand. You might be super specialized on one, but you have to know a few other things. So you cannot say that I'm only doing one or two. So you have to start to have a depth in a few, but understand the impact and touch points with others. So that's one shift which we are seeing. You really start to see what's happening on the digital workplace. This is an area where there's a lot of realization, correct? And this has really happened because COVID really made people wake up and realize the importance of this. Historically, if you see, most of the idea was work location was primarily office with traveler, telecommuter, and that kind of a model. The profiles were numerous super personas and a lot of different aspects. It was tied to location and device. Collaboration was in person and virtual, physical and device security. A lot of this, if you see, start to see what was the pattern. especially in the last 6 months during the lockdown and this, especially in the tech industry, tech-enabled technology, knowledge workers who you could really work from a remote model. It was a survival phase for many companies in terms of, okay, I need to get these things done, because people talked about disaster recovery and business continuity always in the data center. They never worried so much about the workplace because no one ever imagined that you could have a multi-geography, multi-continental workplace impact, correct, from a human perspective. So that's the second flip which was happening. But now what people are really looking at now is, this has made them relook at their cost model, their collaboration model, their engagement model. So they're really looking at, hey, could I have users who, can I have a personas of profiles, but also create a new tag called essential and non-essential, which means you create essential workers and non-essential people who need to be in office. So it's not about remote working, it's about remote working also and safe working inside an office premise. If you had a 100-seater facility, it's not going to only support 40 people. So how do you make sure you use workplace as more as in-person meetups or like weekly stand-ups or more for ideation and those kind of stuff? But for doing a regular productivity or regular office work, you could still work from home. So home might become a new work location, needs completely different security, network performance. Telco networks were traffic engineered that daytime business district got higher bandwidth and residential areas got traffic was optimized. Now you're really starting to see the whole pattern going off the window. So things around like at the home internet, you're seeing competition for bandwidth, correct? You have so many different workloads at home, which is happening, multiple people working from home, sometimes children operating at home. So which means that the whole infrastructure, which was designed to handle a different kind of a traffic, now is taking a different kind of traffic. Pretty much everyone is having video calls or multi-point video meetings. So hence there's a whole new re-architecture needed. It also needs security. Home networks are relatively weaker. So how do you bring SD-WAN to the home now? There's a whole shift now happening is, can you bring business broadband with, what happens if I lose my broadband connection? How do I get fallbacks, correct? How do I get wireless fallbacks, or the same disaster recovery or high availability conversations which we've been having for workplace? It's now extending back to this. So it needs a lot of reimagination. So there's a lot of opportunity which exists, but also you need to start to think about change management, compassion, employee experience, things which are really very, very important, because you need to make sure your productivity continues to improve, your ideation, your innovation continues to happen. So it's a big shift. So a lot of these things are happening in this space of the whole reimagination. And also interestingly, we have a digital dexterity challenge, correct? We have 3 generations now working from home, completely different work experiences or work expectations. So about how do you make sure you're doing an inclusive adoption, and same thing about bringing people back to work in terms of how do you make sure that implementing a lot of sensor technologies and IoTizing the workplace to make sure you're able to bring people back to work as and when you need. So that's a shift happening on the workplace side, which is primarily from productivity into engagement and experience. A lot of focus around, even the skill sets are shifting. The approach is changing. It's all around user centricity. So it's all about looking digital is what you do on B2C, but this is being digital. How do I make B2E digital? How do I make the employee getting the same or a better level of capability so that they could engage with their customers in a better way? So we're seeing a lot of stuff around this whole area around how do you enable this around virtual workspaces, collaboration, guidance, monitoring of user experience, device enablement, adaptive security, and a lot of those other aspects which are put around this whole thing. The third area which you're really seeing is this whole modernization of operations, which is infrastructure and application operations. And this is something which is happening in the industry in a very consistent way. So you're seeing a lot of applications being modernized, which really means that your infrastructure and platform needs to be re-architected. You now need sysadmins who can code. You need developers who understand infrastructure. So which means that historically, this is like 2 different worlds, correct? So how do I bring both of them more closer together? Maybe understand, I'm more and more, we're seeing a pattern that you need more programming skills on infrastructure and more configuration and consumption and assembly skills in applications, because there's a big shift towards low code on the top, and there's a lot of heavy lifting which is happening on the bottom. So the world is inverting in a way. So there's a lot of culture. So automated operations it's a culture, correct? It's about reimagining, rethinking, embedding, build. See, it's not about operational automation, but it's about embedding automation from build to operate. So that's how it becomes a very, very key piece. And that's where the most important shift is happening. And also embedding security as a core, not as an afterthought. So you design to be secure, not you do secure by design. You don't do that like, okay, I roll the code off or build a product out and then think about security. So a lot of this shift is happening over a period of time. And it also, you will not do the same thing for the same environment. You will have this 3 stack of operations, correct? You'll still have traditional operations for applications which are built in a traditional way, or systems which are running in a data center specific infrastructure. You still have to use ITIL, ITSM processes. You can't do CI/CD. You still need to create change tickets. You still need to do a lot of things. You still need to do software asset management on that world, correct? You still need to make sure you're able to manage your license counts, a lot of those aspects, correct? When you start to move towards the right, you're moving towards an as a service model, a consumption model, a more FinOps kind of a mindset from a consumption model perspective, but which also means that your technology model is changing, your operating model is changing, the way you measure SLAs are changing, correct? Traditional ops is all about efficiency SLAs, moving towards now user-centric, business-aligned KPIs. Change is a continuous constant, which is always on, right? So how do you make sure you are able to run hybrid operations of still making sure change control on one end and continuous delivery or continuous change on another end, but with reliability at the center. So here you have reliability and here you have change control. Now, how do you make sure you have these 2 different worlds and how do you bridge them? And especially in cloud ops, many of the times in cloud operations, you're taking traditional workloads and putting them into the cloud. So you need to find a blend of both. So there's a lot of things changing in operations, and which is also causing a lot of skill, tooling, process, a lot of those changes, which all needs to bring in, also the cultural changes happening in operations. So I think this whole area around reimagining the way you run operations in terms of engineering, platform operations, platform developers, application developers, and each focused on different areas, correct? How do I enable business capability? How do I make platform capability? How do I bring site reliability? So a lot of those aspects, and then you still need engineering of storage, security, server, network. It's not going to go away. So in some cases, the hyperscalers do this, but you still need someone to make sure that your hybrid data center and other aspects are all tied in together. So I really use this role that the new reliability engineer, you can call them a cloud reliability, platform reliability, or site reliability, depending upon what layer you're operating. So I don't believe that there is only an SRE is a gold state, pretty much where you control the whole application stack and the code and you create a full stack operator, but you'll still have platform reliability engineers where you are managing the platform, the code lifecycle is still delivered using CI/CD, but you don't control the whole destination. You could also have COTS applications, or then you could also have cloud reliability. But the whole role is changing to become a full stack operator, an automation advocate, a situation manager. And it's no more that L1, L2, L3 pyramid, that kind of a structure. So we're seeing a fundamental shift in the whole scheme of things. So last but not the least, there's a lot of focus happening on security, and security is going through a very interesting this thing. So there is security of infrastructure, but the big shift is that there's a lot of push on security, is that more and more business become digital. Your security becomes a very, very core component, because if you are more susceptible and vulnerable in this new digital world, with everything so dependent that any cyber attack or any cyber malware, downtime, intrusion, data theft, it's a direct link to business reputation and sometimes the license to do business. So hence, this is becoming very critical with IoT, connected ecosystem, things like OT networks, which were never impacted so much by this whole connected world. Now it's becoming as part of this whole thing with Industry 4.0, a lot of those other aspects. There's a lot of focus on compliance, breach, cost and standardization. And pandemic has really reshaped the whole playbook for security, correct? customers have realized that I need to have something bare minimum to run, but everyone is focused on the near term fix and the long term fix, because they've realized that if I don't have zero trust networks, if I don't invest on identity and access management, so the shift is happening, that importance of creating zero trust networks is becoming very, very center theme post the pandemic. So security, there's a lot of investments and shift happening. And if you really start to see what's happening on COVID, especially the focus and the effort around connectivity and continuity, followed by zero trust, and how do I ensure that all my risk compliance controls, because you just opened a completely new threat vector and a risk vector when you're operating from home. So hence making sure you are secured for that aspect, because we always assume that the user was in a secure environment most of the time while at work. So now you're opening up a lot of those aspects. So the ability to do that is going to be extremely critical. So along with this, what I really wanted to give you a perspective was that once we looked at this in holistic, I'm going to go back to the slide which brought everything together. This is where we are in terms of the old world and the new world. The whole infrastructure modernization needs to go through handling both. You cannot ignore old and the new. There's a lot of changes happening in the technology stack. There is a lot of moving parts. One of the things which is happening is softwareization in infrastructure is leading to some benefits, but also it's opening up a lot of different challenges, especially around performance and reliability. Just to give you a perspective, before, if you had a storage subsystem, let's take something which is very easy for all of us to understand. Let's take, if it was a storage environment, you had very little moving parts in a storage infrastructure. You had a fabric, you had a array, you had array controllers, you had disk drives inside it. And you had very much software which was written or engineered with a lot of firmware or FPGA kind of environments. Now what's happened is you're adding layers and layers of abstraction, because now you're saying, okay, I'm going to do VMFS. On top of that, I'm going to create a virtual networking. Then I'm going to do overlay networking. Then I'm going to create logical volumes. I'm going to attach them to the virtual machine environments. Then I'm going to abstract even more. Then you have containers, which needs more abstracted namespaces. So what's happening in this world is there's a lot of ease of use being created for up the stack, but there is more complexity being created for down the stack. So hence in this whole industry, it's very important that all these changes are leading to really up the stack and down the stack, simplicity in up the stack, complexity in down the stack on the hybrid cloud side. On the workplace side, is going the other way. There is too many choices now. You have so many different choices, so many different devices, cloud services, experience services, which people are wanting to consume. So it's becoming a choice of plenty. So bringing all of them together needs a complete reimagination, because we looked at all these boxes, but the last most important thing, you cannot do this in the traditional way. So hence embedding AI ops or bringing AI into operations, and then bringing a lot of service orchestration, SaaS as a service, those capabilities become extremely foundational for reimagining this new digital foundation journey. If you don't bring that culture and bring those embedded capabilities, things will start to fall off. And when the foundation is weak, you can't do business transformation or business operations. So I'm going to pause here and maybe I think take some Q&A or any perspective from George or any comments from your end before we jump into it.
Yeah, okay, thank you for such an insightful presentation. Very, very helpful to us. There is one Q&A question relating if you are willing to share this presentation. If you are, we'll make sure to send it.
It is. The copies are. You have the copy, George, and you can send it across. More than happy. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you to do that. The question I have on my end is, if I look at where the IT infrastructure is going, based on what you're describing, it's becoming, as you said, extremely complex on one end and extremely intuitive on the other end. And since our portfolio companies are on the other end, on the intuitive side, what is the future of their own IT organization? Should they still have IT organizations, or should they basically rely on service provider and be done with it? So what's the future of the IT organization?
Good question. So I had a slide which I had somewhere else, but I will give you a perspective on this. If you are starting new, correct, I would say you should, and the way we look at the world is that if you are a new company today, and if you're starting fresh with very little history, you need to look at and say, as a company, I need a digital foundation. I need to be in digital business in terms of what are the business capabilities I need for my business. And then I need operations. You need to really, you still need a technology leader. So the big question which you have is, do I want to reinvent this whole thing? I'll not go and build my own data centers unless until I am getting into a cloud-enabled service business, or I'm really getting into something which is closer to the data center market. I would not do that, correct? So you would really start to reimagine. If you're a small startup, you'll say, my digital foundation, I'm going to plug into some hyperscaler or some provider on the top. Now you could say, I could go all in with one, or I could go with multiple cloud providers. So the question you need to answer is portability of high importance or speed to market is of high importance? If portability is of high importance, then you build on a technology stack which allows you to run across multiple foundations. So I would say you still need a CIO organization, but I think you don't need to own a lot of people in that. And in many cases, we see the best example, George, is happening is in the telecom industry. If you see what's happened in the telecommunication industry, the CIO and the CTO role is combined now. It's called the CTIO in many of the carriers, because they've realized that the lines are completely blurring. So they still have one role who's focused on enabling capabilities for the core business. So that's how I really put it.
Great. And the other question is, should IT now, or whatever is left of IT, belong to the chief technology officer or the VP of engineering? Would they have to merge then at that time? Similar to what's happening on the telco side.
Yep. So especially if you're a tech company, and especially a lot of your portfolio companies who are tech companies, correct? So you would need to really look at this whole place, correct, into two things. I need something to enable my employees to work, which is what I really call the digital workplace stack, correct? So what do I get my employees to get when they come to work, correct? And let's say you're a software company, correct? You have a software product, you have a supply chain product, you have a collaboration product, or whatever stack. Most of your products in the today's world would be running on a cloud platform, correct? Or you will be a SaaS service, which means if you are the VP of engineering or the CTO, you have to anyway control that stack and the platform, correct? Your CIO cannot run that for you because it becomes very core to your business operations. So effectively, the way I really look at this is anything which is generating revenue for you, or which is sitting in your core direct cost, those all technology capabilities or IT capabilities which is needed to run will all go and sit into the line of business, which is where you control this. And then you take a decision whether you want to run it, you want to outsource to run it, but you control it. Anything which is required for enterprise shared services enablement will move into one bucket, which is basically getting my finance, payroll, HR, and anyway, most of the stack are going to SaaS pretty much, and enabling the workplace. So hence, you might have a digital workplace or a CIO role who might effectively be a shrunk version of the CIO focused on internal enablement. And that's the sense which we are seeing more and more happening with customers. The role of the CIO is shrinking, but it is morphing into a CTO-led organization or line of business IT. So the enterprise CIO is more internal focused, whereas a lot of the tech decisions, which are lines of business, is going out to the CTO organization.
Hey, George, it's John here. May I ask a question?
Yeah, please, John, go ahead.
So, KK, one implication of your discussion today is a completely elevated role for the systems we use for application performance management from top to bottom, whether that's monitoring the resources or the end user management or the back end event infrastructure. Talk a little bit about your views on that, because it strikes me that as much as we change roles, the complexity of the world you described simply needs a new kind of cross-cutting plane in order to be able to manage that. And maybe your thoughts and kind of your formal thoughts around that whole category.
Oh, yeah. So that's what in my closing statement, I made a point about AI ops and service orchestration and flow intelligence, correct? So what we've done is within HCL, because of our product stack, because of our focus around software, we've spun out a lot of intellectual property capabilities which we own into a separate business called Dry Eyes Software, correct? And we basically have created the same stack, correct? Is you have a platform and you have multiple products on top of that. And then you have service orchestration capabilities around service management, SaaS, catalog aggregation, and flow monitoring. APM becomes extremely important, or the new way of doing monitoring, or what you call observability now. It's a term which you use. Observing and taking actions is going to become extremely important. And today, the world is not seen through one view. Unfortunately, what's happening is there is event-centric view, which is people are building solutions based on events. There is log-centric views, correct? There's a lot of companies like Splunk who are saying the world is all about log and pieces around that. There is metrics, which is the third one. There is APM vendors who are trying to come with a more holistic approach about looking at the application, but then the TCO economics don't work. But this market needs better serving, because you go multi-cloud, you go hybrid, you got multiple SaaS applications. Someone guarantee, or you need what I call, like, you have systems of record, systems of engagement, you need a systems of guarantee, correct? Someone has to manage the assurance of this whole thing end to end, and getting that as a service is becoming very, very important for customers. So I think there is a big opportunity which exists in that market, and this is going to get more complex because more and more components so if you have things easy to consume on the SaaS and cloud native, at some point you need to bring all of them together. So either as a service orchestration for catalog and SaaS aggregation, or a single place to monitor and make sure everything is up and running. And really a big area which I think, John, which I think needs to be addressed is the whole issue around FinOps, which is like you have software asset management disciplines which existed in the enterprise IT world, where you procured, you managed your software assets or hardware assets, and you knew what you're spending, tracking usage. In the FinOps world here, because it's very easy, you could consume. You can just go plug and consume, and then you plan A. So hence financial economics, ledger understanding needs to go down to the developer, systems engineer, to that level, because you could build an application which could make 20 API calls, and each API call costs you 0.001 cents. And suddenly if you have a lot of transactions, you see you run a big bill. You have to even write applications now with financial understanding and the financial impact. Same thing on infrastructure. People provision big machines, correct? And then they run into big bills, correct? So hence that discipline needs to, there is a lot of open areas which exist today, especially around the operations and service management stack, which needs to be solved.
Yeah, it just strikes me that the system, I think the system of guarantee is it's a powerful terminology, that because, we ask a 747 pilot to pilot a plane, and we give them, 500 gauges to understand every aspect of the operation of that plane. And many of our IT teams have nowhere near that level of instrumentation, and they're flying an entire enterprise on their back, right? And we need 5 nines from that enterprise. And so that system of guarantee, I think, is a really nice way of framing it. I think there's another question in the queue here, George.
Yeah, let me pick it up. On retaining, can you describe? Okay, interesting. Okay, this is a good. See,
Yeah,
the I
if you don't mind just repeating the question for everyone.
Okay, so the question was on retraining the I profile to E profile. Can you discuss some way the transition has gone well, where not so well? So, okay, so this is a very interesting journey, correct? So, and then we've been, and then the CVK, our CEO, keeps talking about this term called learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? And this world, I think the current world, you have to continue to learn, you have to unlearn a lot of things, and you have to relearn a few things. So what's happening in this space, the way I really put this whole thing together is what we've done well and what we've, areas which you could do. We assume two things, which one is we assume people will learn and adapt quickly. That's a thing which we assume sometimes, most of the time, which is not the case because people are in this industry are so set to be living in stovepipes, right? So hence it takes a lot of effort for people to be coming out of the, like the frog in the well, correct? To come out of the well. So that I to E transition, especially people who are in their midlife of their careers, the effort to transition is very, very high. But there are a lot of examples, again, it goes back to individual personality, correct? There are a lot of people who have adapted to significantly to the new world. It's easy to train freshers whom you get from the outside world into e-profile because they have no baggage and no history. But again, what happens, what the freshers lack is what I call as wisdom, correct? You have data, information, and knowledge, but wisdom can only come with age. So you need to find a way to balance both. You have to get the people who are willing, who have that experience, who have the depth, who know what things work and not work, but who are more plugged into the new world. And then this new young people who have, so a lot of the people who joined HCL post 2011, 12 in the infrastructure business, or 2013 and 14, or INO, the digital foundation business, don't understand data center much. They don't understand storage, VMAX, complex arrays, and RAID, and they think for them, okay, I can just ask for IOPS on the cloud, I get IOPS. They don't even understand how it's engineered. So, but when you run into complex performance issues on that world, you need a blend of both. So I think wisdom plus knowledge is a very important mix. So I think the learning which we have had is you need to find a way to get the people who are in the I world, especially who are 20 years experience, 25 years experience, to learn and adapt to the new world, and get the younger ones and pair them up together. So that's how we really work. It's a tough journey. In many cases, people don't work around, so they fall off, correct? So I think, and it's going to be the same challenge for every one of you, whether you're a full stack developer, it's very hard to find true full stack developers, correct? People who understand the full stack mindset, correct? So it's just the same journey one has to go through. So one more. Okay, if you have any more questions, good. See, good. So more than happy to take any more questions. Or
KK, one question here, John. Again, you talked a little. You said something earlier in the conversation about sort of creation in 7 days, but you didn't have an installed base, right? I think that, and I appreciate that sentiment. There's definitely a pretty robust argument in the community about hybrid cloud versus just pure cloud. And is hybrid cloud just a a construct that the legacy vendors have created because it's useful to say this transition is going to take a long time? Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think we live in a world of smaller companies here at Sumeru. And as a consequence, many of our companies can pretty much get to pure cloud if they want to get to pure cloud. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the reality of this hybrid cloud versus pure cloud.
So this goes back to this picture which I shared, correct? This world on the left-hand side, which is where the core process, traditional infrastructure, it's not. See, I think, okay, there are two parts to this. Obviously, there's a lot of on-prem heavy vendors keep promoting the hybrid cloud story. But the reality is the customers have still a lot of applications which are running in these environments. So you'll be surprised with SAP. Let's take something like SAP, correct? There is so much push by SAP to move to S4, correct? And they also have an S4 cloud, which is a SaaS version. And there is still close to, SAP said that first thing they said they will end support for ECC in 2021, then it became 2023, then it became 2027. So what's happening is that there is so much of complex core processes which have been built on this infrastructure, and SAP is not supporting ECC on cloud. Yeah, you could run it, it's a nightmare, correct? You get it to run on a cloud infrastructure. So many of the cases, the application landscape continues to exist in an environment which might not be cloud friendly. So this whole hybrid cloud, see, I always believe that you build something new for the right-hand world and you build and continue to enhance or sustain the old left-hand side, and then find ways and means to interconnect them more from a data movement and things like that. But as and when you get an opportunity, you keep flipping over. But the reality on the ground, John, is that there is massive, okay, I'll tell you, I can't quote some customer examples, but recently we just took over a pretty large infrastructure and we completely see that you'll be surprised the number of this customer of 25,000 servers they run have 2,000 plus Windows NT 4.0 servers running. Okay. And now we think there is cloud, but someone has to fix this problem. The reason they are running NT4 is some of the applications which were installed or built on that, the COTS vendor, for whatever reason, some of them are sitting in their plants. It is controlling some plant systems. And some kind of a user interface still exists, they still run on NT4. Forget us, even Microsoft refuses to support NT4, correct? And so hence what's happening is that we keep discovering this. So we have to find ways and means to get them off, which means that you have to find ways to modernize the application, containerize the application, do something to make sure it runs on the new infrastructure, or else I still need to run those old infrastructures somewhere. So, and the same thing, iSeries still exists, correct? There is still a lot of AS400 iSeries systems which is still on there, correct? There's still a lot of RISC Unix systems which is still around there. Okay, power. So hence, yeah, it looks very cool from a new world perspective that there is a lot of, if you're starting something new, if you're a smaller company, you'll always focus on the right-hand side. But there is a big market which exists for the left-hand side too. And that's going to take time. Because someone has to spend money, John. The question is who's going to pay for it? Because someone has to pay for modernizing this infrastructure. Now the cloud hyperscalers are getting into the left and saying, okay, I will upfront give you discount on consumption or something. You migrate. I will stave off your this thing. But there are different commercial models which are coming in to solve this. But I think someone has to solve the technology problem, correct? You have to either shut the application, get rid of it, or do something. So that's real. Hybrid cloud is real. Not in a clean way, but someone has to do that dirty job.
Someone has to do the dirty work always. Yep.
Yeah, there's an old saying that there's a lot of software asbestos still left in the world.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, George, there's a lot. I'm telling you, there is a lot. I am still surprised NT4 is alive and people still running with that, and it's a nightmare. We don't even have people to support NT4. So it's like, yeah, it's you'll be surprised the number of new graduates which we are now training in Vietnam and in Sri Lanka and in parts of India to do mainframe, JCL and deep.
So
that thing is not going to die.
One of the takeaways for me though is something like a dry ice platform for you all is incredibly strategic, because the only way you can get the kind of scale that you need and the efficiency is you've got to be able to instrument the variety.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep, and that's what we've done, John, is that we used it internally. But see, dry ice has gone through the same journey. George at least knows the history of what Loud Cloud did with Opsware, correct? They built a software to run internally and then they sent it out external, correct? We've gone through the similar journey, but we've taken the whole stack and now it's externalized, it's licensed as a standalone platform. And people who license our stack, they realize, guys, you know how to solve the old and the new. Because when I go into the market, I only find the new one. Someone has to still help me transition from old to the new. And it continues to happen. And that's where we are helping the customers because we are more pragmatic. We've seen the problems which exist, correct? You'll still be surprised customers still running Hyper-V, even though Microsoft has ended its support, correct? Because VMware is too expensive. They don't want to go to Zen. They're still running those environments and we still get P1s. Someone has to fix it. And you go out to the customer and say, spend $1 million on migrating to VMware. They said, no, keep running it. We will find a way to migrate the application. So it's a very funny situation which the world is in now.
Well, KK, this was very, very insightful. We're approaching the end of the hour here, and really appreciate your insight and your perspective. And there's a lot of food for thought here. So, and thank you for your willingness to share your slides. We'll distribute the slides to the audience, and have a great evening there. And hopefully you can have some good tea in London now after this this presentation. And thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, have a great evening. Bye-bye. Great day for everyone.